You know when someone says, just try the first chapter, and 6 hours later, your dinner's cold and your phone's dead? Welcome to Fractal Enigma Audio Previews, the podcast where we hand you the opening act of a romance novel and dare you not to finish it. This week, Straight Bait Roommate by Jace Wilder. A freshly divorced electrician moves in with his queer best friend to split rent. The spare bedroom is a closet. So they share the bed. And then, one half-joking practice kiss turns into a series of escalating lessons that wreck the straight label, destroy the best friend's boundary, and make both of them confront what they've been circling for 9 years. This one's it's dual POV, and the heat level is, look, there's a reason the bonus chapter couldn't go on Amazon. You've been warned. Chapter 1.
The photo. The study smelled like leather and old money, which was fitting because everything about Senator Richard Hart's life smelled like leather and old money, right down to the daughter currently sitting in the wingback chair, trying not to vomit on the Persian rug. Evelyn crossed her ankles. Uncrossed them. Folded her hands in her lap the way her mother had taught her at 14, left over right, thumbs tucked, posture that said composed even when her insides were liquefying. She focused on a point just past her father's left shoulder where a framed photo hung on the wall, the Hart family at the governor's mansion Christmas reception, 2019. Everyone smiling. Everyone performing. Everyone exactly where they were supposed to be. Circulating on at least 3 political gossip sites as of this morning, Doug Mercer was saying, pacing in front of the bookshelves like a man whose stock portfolio had just caught fire. He was her father's chief of staff, had been for 9 years, and he treated every minor PR hiccup like a 4-alarm crisis. To be fair, this one might actually warrant it. The photo itself is ambiguous enough, but the location isn't. Anyone who Googles the name of that bar is going to get a very specific result. It's a bar, Evelyn said. Her voice came out flat, controlled. Good. People go to bars. People go to that bar for a reason, Evelyn. Her mother's voice sliced through the room from the settee by the window, where Catherine Hart sat with her legs crossed and her reading glasses perched on her nose like she was reviewing a disappointing quarterly report instead of her daughter's public downfall. Don't insult our intelligence. Evelyn's jaw tightened. She could feel the muscle jumping under her skin and knew her mother could see it too. Catherine saw everything. It was her most devastating talent, an X-ray eye for weakness, paired with the surgical precision to exploit it at exactly the wrong moment. A friend invited me, Evelyn said. The lie slid out smooth as silk, the way lies always did when you'd been practicing them since childhood. I didn't check the Yelp reviews before I walked in. Which friend? Catherine asked. Lena. From Georgetown. Lena Park? She's in Singapore. Fuck. A different Lena. How many Lenas do you know? Catherine. Her father's voice, low and tired, from behind the mahogany desk that had belonged to his father and his father's father, because nothing in this family was ever just a piece of furniture. That's not the point. The point, Doug said, stopping mid-pace to face Evelyn with the expression of a man who wanted to be sympathetic but had a campaign to run, is that we're 8 weeks from Election Day. The senator is polling within the margin of error against a challenger who would love nothing more than a culture war distraction. And his daughter was photographed leaving a lesbian bar in DuPont Circle, looking like what? Evelyn asked. Doug hesitated. He had the decency to look uncomfortable, at least. Disheveled. Evelyn almost laughed. Disheveled? She'd been wearing a cashmere sweater and slacks. Her hair had been down, that was the dishevelment. Her hair, which she usually wore in a chignon so tight it gave her headaches, had been loose around her shoulders because she'd taken it down in the car on the way there as a tiny, pathetic act of rebellion. And some photographer with a telephoto lens and a blog had turned that into evidence. I went to a bar, she said again, slower this time, enunciating each word like she was speaking to someone very young or very stupid. I had one drink. I spoke to no one. I left. If that's a scandal, then this campaign has bigger problems than me. The silence that followed was the particular kind of silence that only existed in her father's study. The kind that meant everyone was thinking something they wouldn't say out loud, and that the something was about Evelyn, and that it wasn't flattering. Senator Hart leaned back in his chair. He was a handsome man at 62, silver-templed and square-jawed, the kind of face that photographed well on yard signs and inspired confidence in donors. He looked at his daughter the way he looked at a briefing that contained bad news he'd been expecting, with a calm, measured disappointment that was somehow worse than anger. Doug is bringing in outside help, he said. Evelyn blinked. What kind of outside help? A consultant. Crisis management, media strategy, image rehabilitation. Doug pulled out his phone, scrolling. Sabrina Vale. She runs a boutique firm in the district. She's handled situations like this for. I don't need a handler. Nobody's calling it that, her father said. It's exactly what you're calling it. You're hiring a babysitter because your adult daughter went to a bar. We're hiring a professional, Catherine said, standing from the settee with the fluid grace of a woman who'd been a Miss Virginia finalist in 1987 and had never stopped moving like one. Because our adult daughter has been increasingly erratic for 2 years and we're tired of pretending it's not a pattern. The words landed like a slap. Evelyn felt them in her chest, a hot, tight compression that she recognized as the precursor to either tears or rage, both of which were unacceptable in this room. She chose neither. She chose the third option, the one she'd been choosing since she was old enough to understand that hearts didn't make scenes. She went blank. Fine, she said. When does she start? Doug looked relieved. Her father looked tired. Her mother looked satisfied, which was the expression Evelyn hated most because it meant Catherine believed she'd won, and she had, and they both knew it. Monday, Doug said. I'll send you her brief. Wonderful. Evelyn stood, smoothing the front of her skirt, a gesture so automatic she barely registered it anymore, just her hands performing the constant maintenance of looking acceptable. If we're done, I have work to finish. She made it out of the study, down the hallway with its parade of family portraits and framed commendations, up the stairs to the second floor, and into her childhood bedroom before she let the mask crack. She closed the door, leaned against it, pressed her palms flat against the wood and breathed. The room was exactly as it had been since she was 18, cream walls, a 4-poster bed with a duvet her mother had picked, bookshelves lined with the right titles in the right order. It looked like a page from a Pottery Barn catalog, tasteful, impersonal, designed to impress houseguests rather than comfort the person who actually slept there. When Evelyn had been a teenager, she'd wanted to paint the walls dark blue. Catherine had said no. When she'd put up a poster, just one, Audrey Hepburn in Breakfast at Tiffany's, which was practically mother-approved, Catherine had replaced it with a framed botanical print within a week. This room had never been hers. This house had never been hers. This life had never been hers. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out her phone. The photo was easy to find, the blog had a tacky name, Capital Confessions or something equally stupid, and the headline read, Hart's daughter spotted at DC's hottest sapphic night spot. What's the senator's girl looking for? She stared at the image. It was grainy, taken from across the street with a long lens, and it showed a woman in dark slacks and a cream cashmere sweater stepping out of a doorway beneath a rainbow flag. Her hair was down. Her face was turned slightly away from the camera, but the angle caught her profile, the straight nose, the sharp jaw, the pearl studs she wore even to a bar because she didn't own earrings that weren't pearl studs. She didn't look scandalous. She didn't look disheveled. She looked like a woman leaving a building, which was exactly what she'd been doing. Except, Evelyn zoomed in. There was something in her expression that the grainy photo almost hid but didn't quite. A softness around the mouth. A slight unfocus in the eyes. She looked, if she was being honest with herself, which she almost never was, like a woman who had just seen something that rearranged her. She closed her eyes. The bar came back to her in fragments: warm amber light, music she didn't recognize, the smell of citrus cocktails and perfume. She'd sat at the end of the bar with her gin and tonic and tried to look like she belonged, which she didn't, which was painfully obvious from the way she'd perched on the stool like it might bite her. But no one had cared. That was the first revelation. No one had looked at her sideways, demanded credentials, asked her to justify her presence. The bartender had poured her drink and called her "hun" and moved on. Two women beside her had been arguing about whether to get a cat, and it had been so mundane, so startlingly normal, that Evelyn had almost cried into her Hendrix. And then, the corner booth. Two women. One dark-haired, one blonde, leaning into each other with the easy intimacy of people who'd been doing this for a while. The dark-haired woman had said something against the blonde's neck, Evelyn couldn't hear what, and the blonde had laughed and tilted her head back, exposing the line of her throat, and the dark-haired woman had kissed her there. Just below the jaw. Softly. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. Evelyn had watched. She hadn't meant to. She'd been unable to stop. The kiss had moved from the blonde's neck to her mouth, slow and unhurried, and the blonde's hand had come up to cup the dark-haired woman's face, and they'd kissed like the bar didn't exist, like the music didn't exist, like nothing existed except the precise, devastating point where their mouths met. Evelyn had felt it in her stomach first. A drop, like the bottom falling out of an elevator. Then lower, a warm spreading ache that she'd tried to attribute to the gin and couldn't. She'd sat there with her drink sweating against her palm and her heart hammering, and a single catastrophic thought repeating in her head like a breaking news ticker. Oh, that's what it's supposed to feel like. She'd left after that. Put cash on the bar, walked out, driven home with the windows down and her hands shaking on the wheel. She'd showered and gone to bed and lain there in the dark, staring at the ceiling of her apartment in Arlington, replaying the scene on a loop. The tilt of a throat. The curve of a smile. The casual, gorgeous intimacy of two women who wanted each other and weren't sorry about it. She'd touched herself that night. She didn't do that often. Her sexual history with men had been so uninspiring that her own hand felt like more effort than the payoff warranted. But that night, she'd slid her fingers between her thighs and thought about the corner booth and come so fast it almost hurt. Then she'd rolled over and pressed her face into the pillow and thought, no. You don't get to want that. You're Richard Hart's daughter, and Richard Hart's daughter does not go to lesbian bars and get off thinking about strangers kissing. That had been 3 weeks ago. She'd told herself it was a one-time lapse. Curiosity. Hormones. The natural consequence of being 28 and sexually frustrated and surrounded by men who treated her like a decorative asset instead of a person. And now the photo existed, and Doug Mercer was pacing, and her mother was arranging her life like furniture, and a woman named Sabrina Vale was about to walk into her carefully constructed world and assess the damage. Evelyn looked at the photo one more time. The woman stepping out of the bar. The softness in her face that she hadn't known was there until a stranger's camera found it. She didn't look disheveled. She looked like someone waking up. Evelyn closed the browser and set the phone face down on the nightstand. She lay back on the bed that wasn't really her bed, in the room that wasn't really her room, in the life that had never really been her life, and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in Washington, a woman named Sabrina Vale was being sent a file with Evelyn's name on it. By Monday, she'd know everything: the photo, the talking points, the approved version of who Evelyn Hart was supposed to be. She wouldn't know about the corner booth, the dark-haired woman and the blonde, the kiss that had rearranged Evelyn's understanding of her own body. The way her hand had moved between her legs that night, with a need she'd never felt with any of the careful, appropriate men her family had approved of. She wouldn't know that the image problem wasn't a bar or a photo or a bad headline. The image problem was that Evelyn Hart had spent 28 years in a frame, and 3 weeks ago, in a corner booth in DuPont Circle, she'd seen what it looked like to be free. She pressed her thighs together under the duvet and hated herself for it. Then she stopped hating herself. Then she did it again, pressed, released, pressed, because the memory was right there, vivid and insistent, and her body didn't care about optics or elections or the look on her mother's face. Her body just cared about the dark-haired woman's mouth and the blonde's exposed throat, and the sound the blonde had made, a low, delighted hum, when the kiss deepened. Evelyn's hand drifted to her stomach. Stopped. She was in her childhood bedroom, for God's sake. Her parents were downstairs. Doug was probably still pacing. She pulled her hand back, pressed her palms flat against the mattress, controlled her breathing the way she controlled everything, through force of will and the bone-deep terror of being caught wanting something she shouldn't. Monday. The fixer would be here Monday. Evelyn closed her eyes and tried very hard not to think about women kissing in corner booths. She failed. Chapter 2. The Fixer. Sabrina Vale had a rule about political families. They were never as clean as their press kits, never as dirty as their enemies claimed, and always, without exception, exhausting. She was reviewing the Evelyn Hart file at her desk on Sunday night, a glass of Tempranillo sweating on a coaster beside her laptop, and she was already tired. Not of the work was fine, the work was what she was built for, but of the type. She'd handled a dozen Evelyn Harts in the last 5 years. Senator's kid. Governor's niece. Congressman's wife who smiled wrong at a fundraiser. The details changed, the playbook didn't. Step 1. Contain the narrative. Step 2. Reintroduce the subject as relatable, warm, human. Step 3. Collect the check and never think about them again. The file Doug Mercer had sent over was thin, which meant the family was either disciplined about information security or there wasn't much to find. Bree was betting on the former. Families like the Harts didn't produce messes. They produced controlled detonations and called them crises. She scrolled through the dossier. Evelyn Catherine Hart, 28. Georgetown undergrad, Master's in Public Policy from UVA. Currently serving as communications director for Senator Hart's re-election campaign, which was a polite way of saying she was the family's designated public face when the senator was busy being important. Unmarried. Previously engaged to one Connor Whitfield III, yes, the third, of the Virginia Whitfields, engagement dissolved 18 months ago, no public explanation. And now, a photograph. Bree pulled it up. The image was exactly as grainy and underwhelming as she'd expected. A woman in a cashmere sweater leaving a bar. The bar happened to be Amethyst, which happened to be the best-known lesbian bar in the district, and the woman happened to be the eldest daughter of a Republican senator in a tight re-election race. So here they were. She zoomed in. The photo was mediocre, shot from across the street, but it caught enough. The posture straight-backed, careful, even in a doorway at 11 p.m. The pearl earrings that looked aggressively out of place against the rainbow flag behind her. And the face, turned 3/4 away from the camera, showing a profile that was undeniably beautiful and undeniably tense. Bree had expected a train wreck. A party girl caught stumbling. A spoiled political princess doing something stupid for attention. This wasn't that. This was a woman leaving a building and trying very hard to look like it meant nothing. Which meant it meant everything. Bree closed the file, finished her wine, and texted Doug, Monday 9 a.m. works. I'll come to you. Doug replied in 11 seconds, because Doug Mercer had never in his life let a text sit for longer than 15. Conference room B, Evelyn will be there. She's been briefed. Bree set her phone down and stared at the ceiling of her apartment. Exposed brick, warm lamplight, a water stain in the corner that her landlord kept promising to fix and never did. Adams Morgan at night was all bass from the bar downstairs, and the occasional argument in Spanish floating up through the open window. And she loved it the way you loved a place that had seen you at your worst and hadn't judged. She thought about the photo again. Not the optics of it. She'd have a strategy for that within an hour of meeting the client. She thought about the woman in it. The rigidity of her spine. The earrings. The way she'd clearly dressed to go somewhere she'd never been, in clothes that announced she didn't belong, and gone anyway. That was either recklessness or courage, and in Bree's experience, the two were often the same thing. She poured another glass of wine and told herself this would be a standard job. She was already lying. The campaign office was exactly what she'd expected. Fluorescent lights, whiteboard chaos, the particular stale coffee smell of people who were working too hard on too little sleep and running on conviction instead of common sense. Arlington, Virginia, a nondescript office park that could have housed an insurance company or a dental practice because that was how campaign offices worked: temporary, functional, devoid of charm. Doug met her in the lobby. He was a compact man in his 50s with the energy of a terrier who'd been given too much espresso, all sharp eyes and fast handshakes and sentences that came out like bullet points. Bree liked him. She liked people who didn't waste her time. "Appreciate you taking this on short notice," he said, leading her down a beige hallway. "The senator is worried. Catherine is furious. And Evelyn is," he paused, searching for the diplomatic word. "How is Evelyn?" Bree asked. "Cooperative," Doug said in a tone that suggested this was a more loaded word than it sounded. "Cooperative how?" "She agreed to everything we proposed. Immediately. Without discussion." Bree raised an eyebrow. In her line of work, immediate compliance was never a good sign. People who fought back had energy. People who rolled over had already given up, or were planning something. "How long has she been like that?" Bree asked. Doug glanced at her. "Like what?" "Agreeable. Her whole life." There it was. Doug pushed open the door to conference room B, and Bree walked in, and everything she'd prepared to think evaporated. Evelyn Hart was sitting at the far end of a rectangular table that was too big for the room, in a chair that looked like it had been chosen for durability rather than comfort, with a posture so precise it could have been measured with a level. She wore a navy sheath dress and a blazer the color of fog, and her hair was pulled back in a low knot that looked like it required an engineering degree to assemble. Pearl studs, the same ones from the photo. Hands folded in her lap, left over right, thumbs tucked. Legs crossed at the ankle under the table. She looked like the after photo in a finishing school brochure. She looked like she was suffocating. Bree had spent 15 years reading people for a living. She could clock a liar at 20 paces, spot a marriage fracture from across a ballroom, and identify the precise moment a client was about to break down, bolt, or do something spectacularly stupid. She was good at her job because she saw what people were trying to hide, and she saw it fast. What she saw in Evelyn Hart, in the 3 seconds between the door opening and their eyes meeting, was this: a woman who had been performing so long she'd forgotten she was doing it. Whose composure wasn't confidence but armor. Whose beauty, and she was beautiful, unavoidably, almost aggressively beautiful, the kind of face that made you look twice even when you were trying not to, was being used as a shield rather than lived in. Evelyn stood. Extended her hand. "Ms. Vale? Thank you for taking this on." Her handshake was firm, practiced, exactly 2 seconds long. Her smile was warm and completely disconnected from her eyes, which were green and guarded, and watching Bree with the wariness of a woman who'd been assessed by professionals her entire life and had learned to hate every second of it. "Bree," she corrected. "Nobody calls me Ms. Vale unless they're trying to sue me." The faintest crack. Not a smile, a flicker of something behind the composure. There and gone, like a fish breaking the surface of a very still pond. "Bree, then," Evelyn said. "Please sit." She gestured to a chair as though this were her home and not a borrowed conference room, because of course she did. She'd been raised to be gracious, even when she was the one under review. Bree filed that away in the growing mental catalog she was already compiling. Performs hospitality under stress, defaults to politeness as a control mechanism, doesn't know how to stop being a hostess even when she's the one who needs help. Doug hovered by the door. "I'll let you two get acquainted. Bree, I've got background material on the shared drive, Oppo research on the photo source, the senator's polling numbers, and the approved messaging framework. Evelyn can fill you in on the event calendar." Great, Bree said without looking at him. She was watching Evelyn the way she watched every new client, openly, without apology, the way you'd examine a painting to determine whether the frame was obscuring the art. Evelyn noticed. Her chin lifted fractionally and a faint flush crept up the side of her neck, barely there, quickly suppressed. Bree noticed that too. Doug left. The door clicked shut. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like a migraine waiting to happen, and Bree settled into her chair and folded her arms and gave Evelyn Hart the silence. Most people couldn't stand it. Most people rushed to fill the gap, explaining, justifying, overtalking. Bree used silence the way a surgeon used a scalpel, precisely, purposefully, and with full awareness of what it would expose. Evelyn held the silence for 11 seconds. Impressive. Then, I imagine you've reviewed the situation. I've reviewed the file, Bree said. The situation, I need to hear from you. The situation is straightforward. I went to a bar. Someone photographed me. My family would like the resulting coverage to go away. Why that bar? Evelyn's expression didn't change. I've already explained this to my parents and to Doug. A friend invited me. It was a spontaneous decision. Which friend? A pause. Microscopic, but Bree caught it. The half-second delay of someone accessing a rehearsed answer instead of a memory. Someone from college. And this college friend specifically chose a lesbian bar for a girls' night out? I didn't realize the bar's orientation when I agreed. You didn't notice the rainbow flag on the door? Evelyn's eyes hardened. The composure was still there, but something underneath it shifted, like watching ice crack in real time, fissures running beneath the surface while the top stayed smooth. Are you here to help me or interrogate me? Both, Bree said. I can't fix a narrative I don't understand. The narrative is simple. I made a careless decision, and it's created an inconvenient news cycle. I need it managed. Bree leaned back. Studied her. Evelyn sat perfectly still under the scrutiny, which meant she was used to being studied and had built her entire presentation around surviving it. The dress. The posture. The folded hands. Every element was a choice, not a style choice but a survival choice. This is how I sit so you don't see me. This is how I dress so you see exactly what I want you to see. Okay, Bree said. Here's what I'd recommend. She outlined the standard playbook. Phase 1, Media Management. Get ahead of the story, push it down the algorithm with positive coverage. Phase 2, Image Softening. A wardrobe refresh, not a makeover, just a shift from untouchable to approachable. New talking points for interviews that made Evelyn sound like a human being instead of a press release. Phase 3, Visibility. Curated public appearances that reinforce the right narrative. Evelyn as the senator's warm, dedicated, perfectly normal daughter. If the polling warrants it, Bree added, keeping her voice deliberately neutral. Doug mentioned the possibility of a visibility boyfriend. Someone appropriate for a few public appearances. We have options if. No. The word came out sharp enough to cut. Evelyn's composure cracked for real this time, just for a second, just a flash of something raw and immediate before she smoothed it over. That won't be necessary. Bree held her gaze. It's just an option. Not a requirement. It's not an option. Evelyn's voice was steady again, but her hands had tightened in her lap, the knuckles pale against the navy fabric of her dress. I'm not going to parade around with some rented boyfriend to make a photograph go away. That's beneath both of us. There she is, Bree thought. Under the polish and the practiced smile and the 12 layers of family conditioning, there was a woman with a spine. You just had to push the right button to find it. Noted, Bree said. No rented boyfriend. Evelyn exhaled. The tension in her shoulders dropped a fraction. Not relaxation exactly, but the cautious relief of someone who'd expected a fight and hadn't gotten one. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm about to spend the next several weeks in your space, adjusting your schedule, coaching your public interactions, and telling you what to wear. Most clients hate me by week 2. I don't hate easily. That's because you haven't worked with me yet. Another flicker. That almost smile, the one Bree had caught earlier, the one that suggested Evelyn Hart might actually have a personality under all the armor if someone bothered to go looking. They spent the next 40 minutes on logistics. Event calendar, media commitments, the senator's schedule, the campaign's messaging priorities. Evelyn was precise, organized, and efficient in a way that Bree respected despite herself. She knew the operation inside and out, every donor name, every polling district, every talking point and its variations. She was genuinely good at the work, which made it all the more obvious that the work was eating her alive. Bree watched her talk. She watched the way Evelyn's hands moved when she was explaining something she cared about, quicker, more expressive, freed from the lap-folding prison, and the way they went still and careful the moment she caught herself being animated. She watched the way Evelyn's voice changed when she shifted from policy talk to family talk, warmer on the former, flatter on the latter, like someone turning the volume down on their own feelings in real time. And she watched the neck flush. It happened twice more, once when Bree asked about the broken engagement, that's not relevant to the current situation, and once when Bree stood to refill her water glass and passed behind Evelyn's chair close enough that her sleeve brushed Evelyn's shoulder. A faint pink bloom from the collar of the blazer up to the jaw, there and gone in seconds. It could mean nothing. Plenty of people flushed under stress. Plenty of people were sensitive to physical proximity when they were anxious. But Bree had been reading people for a long time, and the flush didn't read as anxiety. It read as awareness. Bree didn't let herself sit with that observation for more than a second. She filed it, the same way she filed every useful piece of client data, and moved on. I think we have enough for today, she said, gathering her bag. I'll put together a detailed strategy and send it to you and Doug by Wednesday. In the meantime, no interviews, no unscheduled public appearances, and for the love of God, no social media. I don't use social media. Of course you don't. Evelyn stood. Extended her hand again, same firm grip, same 2-second duration, same practice warmth that didn't reach her eyes. Thank you, Bree. I know this isn't the most exciting assignment. You'd be surprised what I find exciting. It came out lower than she'd intended. More personal. Evelyn's hand was still in hers, and Bree was suddenly aware of the specifics, the narrow fingers, the smooth skin, the faint pressure of Evelyn's pulse in the web between thumb and forefinger. A fast pulse. Faster than a woman in a navy blazer with perfect posture should have. Bree let go first. Professional. Easy. Monday, she said. Wardrobe consultation. I'll send you an address. I'll be there. Evelyn held the door for her, because of course she did, and Bree walked down the beige hallway and through the lobby and out into the September heat of an Arlington parking lot, where she sat in her car for a full 2 minutes before turning the engine on. She picked up her phone. Called Kira, who answered on the second ring because Kira was incapable of letting a phone ring more than twice. How's the new client? Kira asked. Spoiled brat or hot mess? Neither. Bree stared through the windshield at the campaign office, its windows blank and fluorescent lit. She's not a crisis, Kira. She's a hostage. Oh no. What? That's your voice. I don't have a voice. You absolutely have a voice, and it's the one you use right before you do something professionally inadvisable. The senator's daughter, Bree? Really? I'm not doing anything. I'm managing her image. And she went to a lesbian bar by herself 3 weeks ago and told her parents it was a friend's idea, and her pulse was hammering when I shook her hand, and she wears pearl earrings to nightclubs because she doesn't own anything else. And she said no to a fake boyfriend like I'd suggested she eat glass. Silence on the line. Then Kira, who had known Bree since their freshman year at Howard and could read her through a phone connection the way most people couldn't read someone standing in front of them. Do not fuck the client. I'm not going to fuck the client. You're thinking about it. I'm thinking about the fact that her family hired me to make her smaller, and she's already so small she barely exists. That's not the same thing. It's adjacent. Goodbye, Kira. Don't fuck the client. Bree hung up, started the car, pulled out of the parking lot. She drove through Arlington with the windows cracked, letting the warm air push through the car, and thought about Evelyn Hart's hands, the way they came alive when she talked about policy and went dead when she talked about her family. The flush on her neck. The way she'd said no to the fake boyfriend with a vehemence that had nothing to do with dignity and everything to do with something she wasn't ready to name. Bree had been doing this work long enough to know the difference between a client who needed a new image and a client who needed a new life. Evelyn Hart didn't need better talking points, or a softer blazer, or a curated Instagram presence. Evelyn Hart needed someone to look at her, really look past the performance, past the armor, past 28 years of someone else's script, and say, what do you actually want? That wasn't Bree's job. Her job was the talking points and the blazer and the carefully managed appearances. But she kept thinking about the photograph. The woman in the doorway. The way she dressed in cashmere and pearls to visit a lesbian bar, like she was attending a state dinner at a country she desperately wanted to visit but didn't have a visa for. She kept thinking about the pulse under Evelyn's thumb when they shook hands. Fast. Nervous. Alive. She kept thinking, that woman is not a problem to be solved. She's a person waiting to happen. Bree turned up the radio and drove home and told herself very firmly that she was going to do this job the way she did every job, efficiently, professionally, and without getting emotionally invested in a client who was beautiful and repressed and clearly, quietly, unmistakably terrified of her own desire. She told herself that, and she meant it. She just didn't believe it. Chapter 3. Fitting. The problem with Sabrina Vale, Evelyn decided by Wednesday morning, was that she was annoyingly good at her job. They were in conference room B again, the same beige walls, the same fluorescent hum, the same table that was too big for the space, and Bree was running her through mock interview questions with the calm authority of a woman who had done this 1,000 times and found it only slightly more interesting than filing her taxes. Tell me about your role on the campaign, Bree said, leaning against the edge of the table with a legal pad she hadn't written on. She was wearing black trousers and a white silk blouse with the top 2 buttons undone, and she looked like the kind of woman who got photographed leaving restaurants in the style section. Not that Evelyn was cataloging her outfit. She was simply observant. I serve as communications director for my father's re-election campaign, Evelyn said. I oversee messaging strategy, donor relations, and public-facing events. It's a privilege to support his vision for Virginia and... Stop. Evelyn stopped. Bree tilted her head. That was technically flawless. Thank you. It wasn't a compliment. You sounded like a press release someone left in a printer tray. If I heard that answer at a cocktail party, I'd excuse myself to get a drink I didn't need. The heat crept up Evelyn's neck before she could stop it. She hated that, the involuntary flush, the way her body betrayed her irritation before her mouth could shape it into something polite. I was answering your question. You were performing an answer. There's a difference. Bree set the legal pad down and crossed her arms. You've been media trained since you were what, 15? 16? 14. 14. So you've had 14 years of someone teaching you to say nothing with perfect diction. That works for a senator. It doesn't work for the senator's daughter, because the daughter is supposed to be the human part of the equation. Voters don't want a second press secretary. They want a person. I am a person. Prove it. Tell me about your role on the campaign, and this time, pretend you have blood in your veins. Evelyn opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. The approved answer was right there, sitting on her tongue like a mint she'd been given at the door. Smooth, predictable, designed to leave no impression whatsoever. I run communications, she said slowly, which mostly means I rewrite my father's talking points at 2 a.m. because his speechwriter has the rhetorical range of a LinkedIn influencer, and I smile at donors who want to tell me about their golf handicaps, and she stopped herself. Pulled back. That's not appropriate. That's the first interesting thing you've said since I walked in. Bree was watching her with an expression that was equal parts amusement and something sharper. Attention. Real, focused attention, the kind that made Evelyn feel like a specimen under a microscope, exposed, examined, seen in a way she hadn't consented to. Keep going. I can't say that on camera. No. But we can find the version of it that you can say. The version that sounds like a human being who actually gives a shit about the work instead of a woman who's been programmed to smile and recite. Bree leaned forward. What do you actually care about? Not what the campaign cares about. You. The question landed in the room like a grenade with a slow fuse. Evelyn stared at her. Nobody had ever asked her that, not in this context, not in any context. The campaign cared about messaging. Her family cared about image. The donors cared about access. Nobody had ever sat across from her in a fluorescent-lit conference room and asked what Evelyn Hart, the actual person, gave a damn about. Education funding, she said before she could stop herself. Title I allocations are a disaster. Virginia is leaving federal money on the table because the application process is Byzantine and nobody in my father's office wants to do the paperwork. I rewrote the proposal 3 times and it keeps getting deprioritized because it's not a headline issue. But there are schools in southwestern Virginia that don't have functioning science labs, and… She stopped. Bree was staring at her. The legal pad was forgotten. The amused expression was gone, replaced by something Evelyn couldn't read, something warm and startled and almost hungry. What? Evelyn asked. That, Bree said quietly. That's who you are. The room felt smaller. Evelyn swallowed. We'll find a way to get that into your public answers, Bree said, straightening, returning to professional mode so smoothly that Evelyn almost wondered if she'd imagined the shift. Not the part about the speechwriter. The part where you sound like someone who actually read the policy brief instead of the Cliff's Notes. Evelyn nodded. Her heart was doing something inconvenient in her chest, beating too fast, too aware, like it had been jolted out of a long sleep by the simple, radical experience of being asked what she wanted. The boutique was in Georgetown, tucked between a bakery and an art gallery on a side street that smelled like espresso and money. It was called Margin, no sign, just a brass number on a black door, and it was the kind of place where nothing had a price tag because if you had to ask, you weren't the target demographic. I have a wardrobe, Evelyn said as Bree held the door for her. You have a uniform, Bree corrected. There's a difference. Inside was cool, minimalist, and staffed by exactly one woman, tall, black, shaved head, cheekbones that could have been designed by an architect, who hugged Bree like they were old friends and appraised Evelyn with a single glance that felt more thorough than a full-body scan. This is Dominique, Bree said. She dresses half the women on the hill, who actually look good. Dom, this is Evelyn. I can see that. Dominique circled Evelyn once, slowly, the way a sculptor might circle a block of marble. Size 4. Maybe a 2 on top. You carry tension in your shoulders. Has anyone ever told you that? No. Your blazers are cutting into your trapezius. I can see the line from here. Everything you own is a half size too structured for your frame. My mother selects most of my. Say no more. Dominique disappeared into the back room. Evelyn turned to Bree. Is she always like that? Always. She's also always right. Bree shrugged off her jacket and draped it over a chair. A casual gesture that shouldn't have been notable, except that it left her in just the silk blouse, and the blouse was thin enough that Evelyn could see the outline of a black bra strap against her brown skin, and she was absolutely not looking at that. She looked away. Looked at the clothes. Looked at a rack of coats she didn't need. Looked at anything that wasn't the shadow of a bra strap. Dominique returned with an armful of garments, a softer blazer and camel, a silk shell and ivory, a pair of trousers that were cut wider and more relaxed than anything Evelyn currently owned, and a dress. Deep green. Sleeveless. Not tight exactly, but shaped in a way that suggested the body underneath it, instead of concealing it. "Try these," Dominique said. "Fitting room is on the left." Evelyn took the clothes and retreated behind a curtain into a fitting room that was larger and better lit than she expected. A full-length mirror, a small bench, a hook on the wall. She started with the blazer and trousers. Safe territory. Familiar. She stepped out. Bree was sitting in an armchair near the mirror, legs crossed, phone in hand. She looked up. Studied Evelyn for a moment. "Better," she said. "The shoulders are right. Turn around." Evelyn turned. She felt ridiculous, like a mannequin being positioned. But Bree stood and walked toward her, and suddenly the ridiculousness evaporated and was replaced by something else entirely. "The hem's not sitting right." Bree's voice was matter-of-fact, professional, the voice of a woman who had done 100 wardrobe consultations. Her hands were another matter. She crouched slightly and adjusted the break of the trouser leg, her fingers brushing the outside of Evelyn's ankle. A graze, nothing more. Impersonal as a tailor's touch. Evelyn felt it in her kneecaps. Bree stood. Moved behind her. Placed both hands on Evelyn's shoulders and pressed down gently. "Drop these. You hold them up around your ears like you're expecting an attack." Evelyn exhaled. Let her shoulders fall. Bree's thumbs pressed into the muscle along the top of her spine, brief, efficient, a physical instruction rather than a massage, and Evelyn's eyes nearly closed. "Better," Bree said, stepping back. "Try the blouse next." Evelyn retreated to the fitting room. She took off the blazer and pulled on the ivory silk shell. It was simpler than what she usually wore. No collar, no buttons, just a clean line from shoulder to hip that left her arms bare and her collarbone exposed. She looked at herself in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked softer. Younger. Less like a senator's daughter and more like a woman who might have a life outside a campaign office. She stepped out. Bree looked up from her phone. Her expression did something, a quick sequence Evelyn couldn't fully track. Surprise, then assessment, then something that flickered and settled and might have been appreciation or might have been something warmer than appreciation. "That works," Bree said. Her voice was slightly different. Lower by a half step, like a note played on a different string. "Come here." Evelyn walked to her. Bree stood again and reached for the neckline of the shell, adjusting, straightening, her fingertips skimming along the collarbone where the fabric met skin. The touch lasted 2 seconds. 3. Evelyn could smell her, something warm and woody with a citrus edge that she'd been trying not to notice since Monday. "Your collarbones are good," Bree said conversationally, like she was commenting on the weather. "You hide them under all those structured necklines. You shouldn't. My mother says collarbones are vulgar." "Your mother is wrong about several things, from what I can tell." Evelyn's breath caught. Not at the words, at the proximity. Bree was close enough that Evelyn could see the faint scar above her left eyebrow, the individual coils of hair at her temple, the almost invisible beauty mark below her right ear. She was close enough that if Evelyn leaned forward 3 inches, their foreheads would touch. She didn't lean forward. She stood very still and felt every cell in her body ignite like a string of lights being switched on, one by one, from her throat to the soles of her feet. "Try the dress," Bree said, stepping back. Casual. Easy. As though nothing had happened, because nothing had. Nothing except Evelyn's entire nervous system rearranging itself around the memory of fingertips on her collarbone. The fitting room curtain felt like a barricade. Evelyn pressed her back against the wall and breathed. Her reflection stared at her from the mirror, flushed, wide-eyed, pink-lipped. She looked like a woman who'd been caught doing something she shouldn't. She hadn't done anything. That was the problem. She took off the shell and the trousers and picked up the green dress. The fabric was structured but fluid, something with weight that would move when she moved. She stepped into it, pulled it up, reached back for the zipper. It caught halfway. She tried again. The zipper was stuck at the middle of her back, in the exact spot she couldn't reach at the right angle. "Everything okay in there?" Bree's voice just outside the curtain. Evelyn could lie. She could wrestle the zipper for another 30 seconds, get it unstuck, walk out fully dressed and fully composed. That was the safe option. The controlled option. The option that every year of her training told her to choose. "The zipper's stuck," she said. A pause. "Want me to?" "Please." The curtain shifted. Bree stepped in. The fitting room was not designed for two people. It had been generously sized for one, but with Bree inside, the walls contracted to something intimate, close air, warm light, the mirror showing both of them in the same frame. "Turn around," Bree said. Evelyn turned. Faced the mirror. Watch Bree's reflection step close behind her. Bree's fingers found the zipper at the small of Evelyn's back. She worked it gently, not yanking, just easing the fabric free from where it had caught. Her knuckles grazed the bare skin of Evelyn's spine. Once. Twice. "The fabric bunched," Bree murmured. "Hold still." Evelyn held still. She held so still she could hear her own blood in her ears. She watched Bree's face in the mirror, focused, intent, her lower lip caught lightly between her teeth as she worked the zipper. The concentration made her look different. Less controlled. More human. The zipper slid up. Bree's fingers traced the line of it to the top, settling the dress into place at the base of Evelyn's neck. Her fingertips rested there for a moment, the nape where the baby hairs were, where the skin was thin and sensitive and no one ever touched. Evelyn shivered. There was no hiding it. It moved through her like a current, visible in the mirror, a full-body tremor that started where Bree's fingers were and radiated outward. Bree saw it. Of course she saw it. Their eyes met in the mirror. For 1 second, one bright, terrifying second, neither of them was performing. Evelyn saw herself the way Bree was seeing her. A woman in a green dress with her spine exposed and her composure in ruins, shivering under a touch that had lasted 3 seconds and rearranged her entire understanding of what it meant to be touched. Then Bree stepped back. Cleared her throat. "Take your hair down," she said. Evelyn reached up. Her hands were not steady, but they were functional. She pulled the pin from her chignon and let her hair fall, dark blonde, past her shoulders, waves from being wound up all day. It spilled over the bare skin of her neck and shoulders, and the dress transformed around it. The woman in the mirror stopped looking like a politician's daughter trying on something new, and started looking like someone else entirely. Someone who went to bars alone. Someone who wanted things. She turned around to face Bree. Not the mirror. "Bree?" Bree looked at her. The professional mask was in place, the appraising eye, the consultant's assessment. But underneath it, something was slipping. A tension around her mouth. A stillness in her body that read not as calm, but as restraint. "That's the one," Bree said. The words were about the dress. The way she said them was not about the dress at all. "I'll take it," Evelyn said. They held each other's gaze for one more beat. Then Bree smiled, her real smile, not the strategic one, and turned and pushed through the curtain, and the fitting room was just a fitting room again, and Evelyn was alone with her reflection and the afterimage of Bree's fingers on the back of her neck. Dominique wrapped the dress in tissue paper. Bree paid, "It's a business expense, don't argue," and they walked out into the Georgetown afternoon, where the September sun was doing its best impression of summer and the sidewalk smelled like fresh bread from the bakery next door. "Same time Friday," Bree said. "We'll prep for the donor reception." She was back to business, her sunglasses on, her jacket slung over one arm. She looked like nothing had happened in that fitting room. She looked like a woman in complete control of her professional boundaries. Evelyn said, Friday. They went to their separate cars. Evelyn sat behind the wheel of her Audi and did not turn the engine on. She put her hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2 and stared through the windshield at a parking meter. Her skin was still buzzing. Not everywhere, specifically. The ankle where Bree's fingers had grazed. The collarbone where Bree had adjusted the neckline. The nape of her neck where Bree's fingertips had rested for 3 seconds that had lasted approximately 45 minutes. She pressed her thighs together. Loosened her grip on the wheel. Pressed her thighs together again. This was not a problem she could manage with posture and deep breathing. This was not a media cycle that would pass, or a talking point that could be refined. This was her body, staging a full-scale rebellion against 14 years of training, and the instigator was a woman with sandalwood perfume and a voice like dark honey, who had zipped up her dress and looked at her in a mirror and said, "That's the one," in a way that made Evelyn want to unzip the dress and ask her to say it again. She was in trouble. The specific, undeniable, no amount of rationalization would fix it kind of trouble. She started the car. Pulled into traffic. Drove home with the windows up and the air conditioning blasting because she was overheating and it had nothing to do with the weather. In her apartment, she hung the green dress in her closet. It looked foreign among the navy and gray and black, a shock of color in a life designed to avoid attention. She touched the fabric where the zipper was. Thought about knuckles against her spine. Thought about the tremor she hadn't been able to hide, and the way Bree's eyes had darkened in the mirror when she saw it. She showered. Changed into pajamas. Made tea she didn't drink. At 11 p.m., lying in bed in the dark, she pressed her face into the pillow and allowed herself to think the thought she'd been holding at arm's length since the fitting room. She touched the back of my neck and I almost came apart. Not from the touch itself, the touch had been nothing. Professional. Perfunctory. A zipper and a fingertip and a 3-second pause. But the pause. That was the thing. That extra beat where Bree's fingers had stayed at the nape of her neck after the zipper was done. Where there was no professional reason to still be touching her, and Bree had touched her anyway, and Evelyn had shivered, and Bree had seen. That pause was a question. Evelyn didn't know the answer yet. But her body did. Her body had answered instantly, involuntarily, unmistakably. Yes. She rolled over and stared at the ceiling and thought about Friday. Friday was 2 days away. She would spend those 2 days being professional and composed and perfectly, irreproachably appropriate. She would not think about fingers on her spine. She would not think about the way Bree's voice dropped half a register when she said, "Come here." She would not think about the green dress. She failed on all 3 counts before midnight. Chapter 4. Cracks. Bree's apartment was not the right place for a client meeting. She knew this the way she knew all the things she was going to do anyway. Clearly, rationally, with full awareness that she was making a decision she'd have to justify later. The campaign office had ears. Doug's assistant lingered outside conference rooms. The intern, Megan, the one with the sharp eyes and the political science degree she brought up every 40 seconds, had a habit of materializing in doorways at precisely the wrong moment. None of that was the real reason. The real reason was that Bree had spent 3 days thinking about the fitting room, and she wanted to see Evelyn in a space that didn't smell like fluorescent lights and stale ambition. Professional. This was professional. She tidied the apartment, not compulsively, just the baseline maintenance of a woman who might be bringing a client home. Cleared the coffee table of the 3 books she was reading simultaneously. Straightened the throw pillows on the couch. Put a bottle of wine in the fridge because coaching sessions ran better when the client was relaxed, which was a legitimate therapeutic principle and not an excuse. Evelyn arrived at 7. She was still in work clothes, a pencil skirt, a fitted blouse in pale blue, her hair in the low knot that Bree was starting to think of as her default armor. She stood in the doorway and looked at the apartment the way a tourist might look at a foreign country. Fascinated, slightly uncertain, cataloging everything. "Come in," Bree said. "It's not going to bite." Evelyn stepped over the threshold with the careful precision of a woman entering a space she'd been thinking about since receiving the address. Bree watched her take in the room, the exposed brick, the overloaded bookshelves, the Keelim rug she'd bought at a flea market in Charlottesville, the kitchen counter with its collection of hot sauces, and a French press that was never fully clean. The apartment was warm, lived in, chaotic in the deliberate way of someone who valued comfort over aesthetics. It was the opposite of everything Evelyn's life seemed to be. "This is nice," Evelyn said, and she sounded like she meant it, genuinely, not politely. Her hand drifted along the spine of a book on the nearest shelf. "The Fire Next Time." Her fingers paused there, tracing the title. "Baldwin," Bree said. "I know." Evelyn glanced at her. "I wrote my senior thesis on his essays." "You're kidding." "My mother wanted it to be on Reagan's economic policy. I'm fairly certain she's never forgiven me." Bree smiled. Filed that away, another crack in the marble, another flash of the woman underneath the performance. "Wine?" "Please." She poured 2 glasses of the Tempranillo, her reliable, her thinking wine, and they settled on opposite ends of the couch with the donor reception talking points spread on the coffee table between them. The apartment was quiet, the neighborhood noise muffled by closed windows, and in the warm lamplight the distance between client meeting and something else felt thinner than it should have. They worked for an hour. Bree ran Evelyn through scenarios: the aggressive donor, the nosy journalist, the well-meaning family friend who'd ask about the bar photo in a way that pretended to be sympathetic. Evelyn was good. Better than good. She parried every hypothetical with the precision of a fencer and the composure of a woman who'd been doing this since the age of 14. But by 8:30, the composure was wearing. Bree could see it, the way Evelyn's shoulders crept back toward her ears, the slight thinning of her voice, the mechanical quality creeping into answers that had been sharp an hour ago. She was tired. Not physically, though that too. She was tired the way a person gets tired when they've been holding a shape that isn't theirs for too long and the muscles are starting to give. Bree set down her legal pad. "Okay. We're done." Evelyn blinked. "We haven't covered the education." "We're done with the talking points." Bree refilled both wine glasses. Settled back into the couch cushions. "You've been in performance mode for 2 hours and you're about to start looping. Tell me something real." "Everything I've been telling you is real." "Everything you've been telling me is approved." "There's a difference." Bree took a sip of wine and watched Evelyn over the rim. The lamp caught the green of her eyes, not the bright green of something cheerful, but the dark green of deep water, the kind you couldn't see the bottom of. Forget the donors. Forget the camera. If you were sitting here with a friend and no one was listening, what would you actually say? "I don't know what you're asking." "Yes, you do." Evelyn looked at her wine. Looked at the bookshelves. Looked at the window where the Adams Morgan night was doing its usual thing, bass thumping from downstairs, someone laughing on the sidewalk, the warm amber glow of a city that didn't sleep so much as catnap. "I'd say I'm tired," Evelyn said quietly. "I'd say I've been tired for a very long time, and I don't remember what it feels like not to be." Bree didn't respond. She let the silence sit. Evelyn's gaze had gone distant, focused on a point somewhere past the window, and her hands were wrapped around the wine glass like it was the only solid thing in the room. "I broke off the engagement," Evelyn said. "I know. It was in the file. The file says I wasn't ready. That's what we told people." "What's the real version?" A pause. Long enough that Bree thought she'd pushed too far. That Evelyn would retreat behind the composure, smooth the skirt, straighten the spine, deliver another approved answer with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She didn't. "Connor was perfect," Evelyn said. "On paper. Educated, from a good family, The kind of man who knows which fork to use at a state dinner and actually cares. He was kind. He was attentive. He was everything my mother ever wanted for me. But I couldn't. Evelyn stopped. Started again. Her voice was different now, stripped of its polish, raw at the edges, like a wall that had been scraped down to the plaster. I couldn't feel anything. I tried. For 2 years I tried. I went through every motion. We were intimate and she closed her eyes briefly. I kept waiting for it to arrive. The thing people talk about. The pull. The heat. I'd lie there thinking, this is supposed to be it. This is supposed to be the person. Feel something. And I never did. Bree's chest ached. Not with pity, she didn't do pity. With recognition. With the particular sharp empathy of watching someone describe a prison she'd built around her own body and only just realized had a door. I thought there was something wrong with me, Evelyn continued. She was speaking to the wineglass now, not to Bree. Genuinely. I thought I was defective. That whatever part of a person is supposed to want another person was missing from me. Like a manufacturing error. A small bitter sound that wasn't quite a laugh. My mother suggested a therapist. The therapist suggested a sex counselor. The sex counselor suggested breathing exercises and sensory focus, which are both very reasonable strategies that do absolutely nothing when the core problem isn't technique. What's the core problem? Evelyn looked up. Met Bree's eyes. And in that look, Bree saw the thing she'd been suspecting since the first meeting in conference room B, the thing the photo had hinted at, the thing the bar visit had screamed, the thing Evelyn's entire life was architecturally designed to suppress. I was looking in the wrong direction, Evelyn said. The room changed. Bree felt it happen, a shift in the molecular structure of the air between them, a thickening, like the moment before a storm when the pressure drops and everything goes still. Outside, someone honked. The bass from downstairs thumped. Inside the apartment, there was only the sound of 2 women breathing and the weight of a sentence that had probably never been said out loud before. Bree set her wine glass on the coffee table. Slowly, deliberately, giving herself time to choose her next words with the same care she'd choose a foothold on a cliff face. You went to that bar on purpose, she said. Not a question. Evelyn's chin dipped. A fractional nod. Not because a friend invited you. No. Because you wanted to see. Because I needed to know. Evelyn's voice was barely above a whisper now, and her eyes were bright, not with tears, not yet, but with the particular shine of a person standing at the edge of something and looking down. I needed to know if what I was feeling was real or if I'd invented it because the alternative was admitting I was just broken. And I sat in that bar and watched 2 women kiss in a corner booth and felt more in 30 seconds than I'd felt in 2 years with a man who loved me. She swallowed hard. So, not broken. Just looking in the wrong direction for a very long time. Bree wanted to touch her. The impulse was specific and almost physical. Reach across the couch, take her hand, press her thumb into the center of Evelyn's palm the way she would with anyone she cared about who was hurting. She didn't. Not because it would be inappropriate, though it would be, but because if she touched Evelyn right now, in this room, with this much truth between them and tempranillo in both their bloodstreams, she was not confident she'd stop. You're not broken, Bree said. You don't have to. I'm not being nice. I'm telling you a fact. There is nothing wrong with you. There was never anything wrong with you. Evelyn's breath caught. A small, involuntary sound, the sound of someone hearing a thing they'd needed to hear for so long that the relief of it was almost indistinguishable from pain. I don't know what I am, Evelyn said. I don't know if this means I'm gay or bisexual or if it's just. It doesn't have to mean anything yet. Labels are for when you're ready. Right now, all it means is you felt something real and you were brave enough to go looking for it. Going to a bar alone isn't brave. Going to a bar alone when your entire life is designed to keep you from wanting things? That's the bravest thing I've heard all week. Evelyn stared at her. The composure was gone, not cracked, not slipping, fully dismantled. What was left underneath was a woman Bree hadn't seen before, younger, softer, terrified, and so beautiful it made Bree's throat tight. She looked like a painting that had been cleaned, all the dark varnish stripped away, the original colors emerging vivid and overwhelming. "How do you do that?" Evelyn asked. "Do what?" "Say the exact thing I didn't know I needed to hear." "Occupational hazard. Is that all it is?" The question hung between them. Bree knew the right answer, the professional answer, the one that would preserve the boundary and protect them both. "Yes. Occupational hazard. I'm good at reading people. Don't read into it." She didn't say that. "No," she said. "That's not all it is." The honesty cost her something. She could feel it, a door opening inside her chest that she'd deliberately kept shut since Monday, since the handshake, since the pulse under Evelyn's thumb and the way she'd said no to the fake boyfriend like the suggestion had burned her. Evelyn didn't respond. She just looked at Bree with those dark green eyes, and the look was not the guarded assessment of a woman managing her image. It was the unprotected gaze of a woman who was seeing someone clearly, maybe for the first time, and not looking away. Bree broke the moment. She had to. If she didn't, she was going to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed, not in this room, not with wine on both their lips and confessions hanging in the air like smoke. "It's late," she said. "I should let you get home." "Right." Evelyn blinked. Seemed to return from somewhere far away. "Right, of course. I have an early morning." They stood. The distance between the couch and the front door was 12 feet, maybe 15, and they covered it in silence. Not awkward silence, charged silence. The kind that hummed at a frequency just below hearing, felt in the sternum, in the fingertips, in the back of the neck where someone's touch had lingered 3 days ago. Bree opened the door. Evelyn stepped into the doorway and turned back. This was the goodbye. The professional sign-off. "Good night, see you at the event, same time next week." Bree had rehearsed it in her head, the way she rehearsed everything, the exact words, the exact tone, the exact distance to maintain so that both of them could walk away with their dignity intact. Evelyn turned, and Bree was closer than she'd meant to be. They were standing in the doorway, 6 inches apart. Close enough that Bree could see the faint freckle on Evelyn's lower lip that she hadn't noticed before. Close enough that she could smell Evelyn's skin, something clean and faintly sweet like vanilla and warm cotton, a scent that was entirely too innocent for the way Bree's body was responding to it. Evelyn opened her mouth to say something. "Thank you. Good night." Something safe, something that would let them both off the hook. But her gaze dropped. It was unmistakable. A flicker, quick, involuntary, reflexive, from Bree's eyes to Bree's mouth. A glance that lasted less than a second and communicated more than everything she'd said all evening. It said, "I'm thinking about it." It said, "I've been thinking about it." It said, "If you leaned in right now, I wouldn't stop you." Bree saw it. Felt it land in her stomach like a lit match dropped into dry grass. Her fingers twitched at her sides, the urge to reach out, to cup Evelyn's jaw, to close the distance that was nothing and everything and the only thing standing between professional and catastrophic. She didn't. She held still. She breathed. She let the moment exist, suspended, unbearable, perfect, without acting on it. Evelyn's eyes came back up. The flush was there again, climbing her neck like a vine, and her pupils were dilated, and her lips were parted slightly, and she looked like a woman standing on the edge of a cliff waiting for someone to tell her whether to jump or step back. "Good night, Bree," she said. Her voice was steady. Her hands were shaking. "Good night, Evelyn." Evelyn left. Her footsteps on the stairs were careful, measured, the footsteps of a woman who was concentrating very hard on walking in a straight line. Bree listened until the building's front door opened and closed, and then she stood in her own doorway for a long, stupid moment, staring at the empty hallway. She closed the door. leaned against it, pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes. She could still smell her. Vanilla and warm cotton. It was going to cling to the couch cushions. It was going to be in the air for the rest of the night, and tomorrow, and possibly for the rest of her natural life. Bree walked to the kitchen. Poured the rest of the tempranillo down the sink, because if she drank any more tonight, she was going to call Evelyn and say something she couldn't take back. She washed both glasses. Put them in the drying rack. Braced her hands on the counter and stared at the backsplash. She thought about the way Evelyn had said, looking in the wrong direction. The precision of it. The fear in it. The way her voice had gone small and honest, like a child admitting to something she'd been told was wrong and discovering, in the telling, that it wasn't. She thought about the doorway. The 6 inches. The flicker of green eyes to her mouth. She thought about what it would have felt like to kiss her there, in the doorway, with the hallway light casting a yellow stripe across the floor and Evelyn's back against the frame, and both of them tasting like red wine and bad decisions. She didn't call Kira. Kira would say "I told you so" with too much satisfaction, and Bree didn't want to hear it. She didn't want to hear the lecture about professional ethics, and the cautionary tale about the time she'd slept with the congressman's press secretary, and lost the account, and eaten nothing but regret and pad thai for 3 weeks. This was different. This was worse, because it wasn't about attraction, or it wasn't only about attraction. It was about watching a woman who'd been sealed shut for 28 years start to open, hairline fracture by hairline fracture, and knowing that the opening was dangerous and necessary, and that Bree was, whether she liked it or not, the one holding the chisel. She was falling for a client. A closeted, confused, terrified client who was the daughter of a Republican senator in a tight re-election race, and who had looked at Bree's mouth in a doorway like it was the entrance to a country she desperately wanted to visit. This was not in the playbook. This was not containable, manageable, or professionally appropriate. This was the kind of thing that ended careers, burned bridges, and generated the type of headlines Bree was specifically hired to prevent. She turned off the kitchen light, walked to her bedroom, lay down on sheets that she would swear still held a trace of vanilla, though Evelyn had never been in this room, had never been near this bed, and the scent was probably just Bree's brain doing something cruel and imaginative with insufficient data. She closed her eyes. She thought about 6 inches and what would have happened if she'd closed them. She thought about it until she fell asleep, and then she dreamed about it, and in the dream she didn't hold still. In the dream, she reached out and touched the freckle on Evelyn's lower lip with her thumb and said, "Tell me to stop," and Evelyn said, "Don't you dare," and the 6 inches became 0 and the dream went somewhere Bree was not going to think about while she was awake and sober and still technically employed. She woke at 3 a.m. with her heart pounding and her hand between her thighs and the taste of wine on her tongue. She didn't finish what her body had started. She rolled over and pressed her face into the pillow and thought, "You are in so much trouble." The pillow didn't argue. Chapter 5. After Hours. The text arrived at 4 p.m. on a Thursday, 12 words that detonated Evelyn's entire evening. "Wear something that isn't armor. I'm picking you up at 9. She stared at her phone for 30 seconds, standing in the campaign office kitchen with a mug of terrible coffee going cold in her hand. Then she typed, "For what?" Bree's reply was immediate: "Exposure therapy. If you look comfortable in uncontrolled environments, no photo can hurt you." It was a reasonable, professional rationale. It was also, Evelyn suspected, complete bullshit. But she'd spent the last 6 days being professional, rehearsing talking points, attending a donor luncheon where she'd performed beautifully, texting Bree only about schedules and messaging strategy, and the effort of maintaining the boundary was starting to feel like holding a door shut against a rising flood. Something was going to give. She was afraid of what it would be. She typed, "Where are we going?" "Somewhere you've never been. 9 p.m. Don't be late." Evelyn locked her phone, finished her coffee, and spent the next 5 hours pretending she wasn't thinking about what "something that isn't armor" meant. At 8:15, she stood in front of her closet in her Arlington apartment and confronted the evidence of her own repression. Navy, gray, black, cream. A column of blazers arranged by darkness. Sheath dresses that could be swapped interchangeably without anyone noticing. Silk blouses in colors her mother had approved when Evelyn was 22. The green dress hung among them like a foreign dignitary, vivid, conspicuous, radiating the memory of a zipper and a mirror and fingertips on the nape of her neck. She couldn't wear the green dress to a bar. It was too much. Too obvious. Too, I got dressed for you and we both know it. She pulled out a pair of dark jeans she'd bought on impulse 6 months ago and never worn. A black camisole, simple, thin-strapped, lower cut than anything she'd wear in public. She put them on and looked in the mirror and saw a stranger. Not the senator's daughter. Not the campaign face. Just a woman with bare shoulders and dark jeans and an expression that was either terrified or excited or both. She left her hair down, took out the pearl studs, and replaced them with small gold hoops she'd found at the back of a drawer. Put on mascara, a darker lip than usual. She looked like someone who might go to a bar. Like someone who might belong there. Her phone buzzed at 8:58. I'm outside. Evelyn grabbed her purse, locked the apartment, and walked downstairs on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. Bree's car was a black Audi sedan, clean, understated, the kind of car that didn't draw attention, which was probably the point. Evelyn opened the passenger door and slid in, and the interior smelled like sandalwood and warm leather, and her pulse immediately did something unhelpful. Bree looked at her. She was wearing black jeans and a fitted charcoal t-shirt and boots, and her hair was down in loose twists, and her earrings were gold hoops, bigger than Evelyn's, statement pieces that caught the streetlight. She looked like the kind of woman who walked into rooms and rearranged the gravitational field. She looked like trouble with good taste. Better? Bree said, her eyes moving from Evelyn's face to her bare shoulders to the camisole to the jeans. The assessment took 3 seconds and felt like being touched. But you still look like you're going to a confirmation hearing. These are the most casual clothes I own. That's tragic. Bree reached into the back seat and produced a jacket. Leather. Soft, broken in, the color of dark espresso. Put this on. Evelyn took it. The leather was warm from the car, supple in a way that meant expensive or old or both. She slipped her arms in. It was slightly too big, Bree's shoulders were broader, and it settled around her like an embrace. The collar smelled like sandalwood. Like Bree. She didn't take it off. Where are we going? She asked, buckling her seatbelt with fingers that were steadier than they had any right to be. A bar in DuPont. Not the one from the photo. Different place, different crowd, less likely to have paparazzi parked outside. Bree pulled into traffic. The idea is desensitization. If you can be comfortable in spaces like this, no photograph can be weaponized against you. You're not hiding, you're socializing. Is that the official strategy? That's the pitch I'd give Doug if he asked. And if I asked? Bree glanced at her. In the passing streetlights, her face was a shifting landscape of shadow and gold. If you asked, I'd say you spent 28 years in a cage, and I want to show you what the world looks like from the outside. Evelyn's chest constricted. She turned toward the window so Bree wouldn't see the effect those words had on her, the way they hit her like a key in a lock, something clicking open that she'd thought was permanent. They drove in silence for a few minutes. The city slid past, monuments lit up like birthday cakes, the Kennedy Center gleaming on the river, the slow curve of Rock Creek Parkway. Evelyn watched it and thought about how she'd lived in this city for 6 years and never seen it like this. At night, from the passenger seat, wearing someone else's jacket and going somewhere she'd never been. You're nervous, Bree said. I'm fine. You've been gripping the door handle since Roslyn. Evelyn released the door handle. I'm a little nervous. Good. Nervous means you care about what happens next. The bar was called Ellipsis. It occupied the ground floor of a row house on a side street in DuPont Circle, its presence announced by nothing more than a small neon sign, 3 dots glowing pale lavender, above a door painted matte black. From outside, you'd walk past it without knowing it was there. From inside, Evelyn realized the moment they stepped through the door, it was an entire world. The space was warm. Low ceilings, exposed beams, candles and amber glass on every surface. The music was something electronic and unhurried, a beat you felt in your ribs more than your ears. The light was golden and forgiving, the kind of light that made everyone look like the best version of themselves. The bar ran along one wall, backed by a mirror that reflected the room into something twice its actual size, and the rest of the space was a loose arrangement of booths, tables, and a small area near the speakers where people were dancing. People. Women. Women everywhere, at the bar, in the booths, on the small dance floor, leaning against walls with drinks in their hands. Women in jeans and flannel. Women in suits. Women in dresses that would have made Evelyn's mother faint. A couple by the bar was sharing a cocktail, one woman drinking while the other whispered something in her ear that made her laugh and nearly choke. A group near the window was celebrating someone's birthday, a cake with sparklers throwing light across their faces. It was casual, warm, unremarkable. And it was the most radical thing Evelyn had ever walked into, because every person in this room was living openly in a way that Evelyn had spent her entire life being taught was impossible. "Breathe," Bree said close to her ear. Evelyn breathed. Bree took her hand. Just like that, casual, easy, the way you'd take someone's hand to guide them through a crowd. Bree's fingers laced through Evelyn's and pulled her forward into the room, past the bar, through a cluster of women who greeted Bree with hugs and raised glasses and the easy familiarity of regulars. Bree's hand was warm and dry and certain, and Evelyn followed it like a compass needle following north. "Bree, where've you been?" A tall woman with locks and a leather vest appeared from the crowd and pulled Bree into a one-armed hug that radiated genuine affection. "We missed you at trivia last week." "Working." Bree's hand was still holding Evelyn's. She hadn't let go. "Tasha, this is Evelyn." "Evelyn, Tasha. She runs the best trivia night in the district and cheats shamelessly." "I don't cheat. I'm just smarter than everyone else." Tasha's gaze landed on Evelyn with open, friendly curiosity. "Nice to meet you. You look like you need a drink." "I definitely need a drink," Evelyn said, and was startled by how normal her voice sounded. How human. They ended up at the bar. Bree ordered a bourbon neat for herself and a gin and tonic for Evelyn without being told, which meant she'd either noticed the drink in the file photos or she'd guessed. Both options made Evelyn feel seen in a way that was unsettling and addictive. The bartender, a woman with a shaved head and sleeve tattoos and a smile that could have powered the city grid, poured the drinks and winked at Evelyn. "First time?" Evelyn flushed. "Is it that obvious?" "You're holding your clutch like it's a flotation device, babe. Relax. Nobody here bites unless you ask nicely." Bree laughed. The sound was loose, unguarded, different from her professional laugh, the one she deployed in campaign offices and strategy sessions. This was real. This was Bree in her element, Bree among her people, and the difference was so stark it made Evelyn ache. They moved to a booth in the back corner. The leather seats were worn soft. Bree slid in first, and Evelyn slid in beside her, not across from her, beside her, which was either a strategic choice to hear over the music or an excuse to be close, and Evelyn chose not to examine which. Their shoulders touched. Bree's arms stretched along the back of the booth behind Evelyn's head. Not around her, just there. A presence. A possibility. "How are you doing?" Bree asked. She turned toward Evelyn, and the music was loud enough that she had to lean in to be heard. Her mouth was close to Evelyn's ear. Her breath was warm. Scale of 1 to 10. 7, Evelyn said. "Maybe 8. 8 being what?" "Terrified and fascinated, in roughly equal measure." Bree smiled. Close enough that Evelyn could see the exact shape of it. The way her lower lip was slightly fuller than the top, the way the smile started on the left side and migrated. "That's a good place to be." Terrified and fascinated is where all the interesting things happen. They drank. They talked. Not about the campaign, not about talking points or donor events or the senator's polling numbers. About real things, the kind of things that live under the surface of a person and rarely get air. Bree talked about growing up in Prince George's County, about her mother, the principal who could silence a cafeteria with one look, about her father who left when she was 12 and sent a card every Christmas with a $100 bill inside it, like that covered the absence. She talked about Howard, about her first girlfriend, a pre-med student named Jasmine who'd kissed her behind the library and changed the entire trajectory of her life. Just like that? Evelyn asked. One kiss? Just like that. One kiss and I thought, oh. So this is what everyone's been talking about. Evelyn's grip tightened on her glass. She knew that feeling. She'd felt it in a different bar, watching strangers 3 weeks ago. But she didn't say that. She didn't have to. Bree's eyes said she understood. Evelyn talked too. About things she never discussed, about writing her Baldwin thesis in secret, about the day she'd told her mother she didn't want to run for office, and Catherine had looked at her like she'd announced she was joining a cult. About the loneliness of being well-known and invisible at the same time. About the engagement, the men, the emptiness. I kept thinking the problem was specific, she said. This man is too boring. This man is too aggressive. This man talks too much about his rowing times. I thought if I just found the right one, you'd feel something. Yes. And you never did. Not once. Evelyn took a long sip of her gin and tonic. The ice was melting, diluting the juniper. Not until... She stopped. Bree waited. She was good at waiting, patient in a way that felt less like politeness and more like a trap. A warm, inviting, sandalwood-scented trap. Not until recently, Evelyn finished, which was a coward's answer and they both knew it. Bree's fingertips brushed the back of Evelyn's neck. Light. Barely there. A graze against the skin just above the collar of the leather jacket that might have been accidental if the jacket hadn't been Bree's, and the neck hadn't been Evelyn's, and if anything between them had ever been accidental at all. You're staring at me, Bree said. Evelyn realized she was. She'd been watching Bree's face while they talked, the expressions, the candlelight on her skin, the way her throat moved when she swallowed, with the unblinking focus of a woman who'd been starving and had just been shown food. You're hard not to stare at, Evelyn said. The honesty of it surprised them both. Evelyn felt it leave her mouth and land in the space between them like a match struck in a dark room. Sudden, illuminating, dangerous. She should take it back. Qualify it. Turn it into something safe. She didn't. Bree's gaze held hers. The candlelight reflected in her dark eyes, 2 tiny flames, and the noise of the bar seemed to recede, the music, the laughter, the birthday sparklers, until there was nothing but the booth and the leather and the 6 inches between their faces. Good, Bree said. Quiet. Certain. Like she'd been waiting for Evelyn to say it. The moment broke, or rather it was broken for them. A woman appeared at the edge of the booth, tall, dark-skinned, gorgeous, wearing a dress that could only be described as ambitious. She leaned down toward Bree with a grin. Sabrina Vale. I haven't seen you in this bar in months. Come dance with me. Bree's eyes didn't leave Evelyn's immediately. There was a hesitation, a fraction of a second where the question was visible, do you want me to stay? Evelyn should have said yes. Should have put her hand on Bree's thigh under the table and said don't go. But the old programming was too fast, the reflex too deep, the part of her that had been trained never to be possessive, never to need anything too visibly, never to make a claim she wasn't authorized to make. Go, she said. And smiled. And hated herself for both. Bree slid out of the booth. The woman, tall, confident, already touching Bree's arm with a familiarity that made Evelyn's stomach clench, led her to the small dance floor near the speakers. They were 10 feet away. Close enough to see everything. The music shifted. Something slower, heavier, a bass line that thrummed like a pulse. Bree moved with the kind of ease that came from a body that had always known how to occupy space, fluid, rhythmic, unself-conscious. The tall woman moved with her, close but not quite touching, and they danced the way people dance when they know each other's rhythms, facing each other, smiling, the conversation happening in hips and shoulders instead of words. Evelyn watched. She watched the tall woman lean in and say something against Bree's ear. She watched Bree laugh, head tilted back, throat exposed, and she thought about the blonde in the corner booth at Amethyst, the same tilt, the same exposed throat, and felt the same elevator drop in her stomach, except 100 times worse because this wasn't a stranger, this was Bree, this was her Bree, and the possessive pronoun arrived in her mind fully formed and furious and completely unauthorized. The tall woman put a hand on Bree's hip. Casual, friendly, possibly meaningless. Evelyn's fingers tightened on her glass so hard she heard the ice shift. She catalogued her own body the way she'd been trained to catalog everything, analytically, precisely, as though naming the symptoms would neutralize them. Heart rate elevated. Jaw clenched. Breathing shallow. Stomach tight. And lower in the place she'd spent years pretending didn't respond to anything, a heat that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with watching another woman's hand on the hip of the woman Evelyn wanted to be touching. She was jealous. Not abstractly. Not intellectually. Jealous in her body, in her blood, in the specific and unmistakable way that meant mine and get your hand off her, and I want to be the one making her laugh like that. The song ended. Bree hugged the tall woman, brief, friendly, and walked back to the booth. She was flushed from dancing, her skin glowing, and she slid in next to Evelyn and picked up her bourbon and took a sip as though nothing extraordinary had happened. "Sorry about that," she said. "Nina and I go way back." "You don't need to apologize." "You look like I need to apologize." "I look fine." "You look like you want to break that glass." Evelyn realized she was still gripping the gin and tonic with both hands. She set it down carefully. Folded her hands in her lap. Composure. Control. The old habits, reaching for her like tentacles. "I'm fine," she said again, and the word had never sounded more like a lie. Bree studied her. In the candlelight, her expression was careful, reading Evelyn the way she always did, with that infuriating precision that saw through every wall. "We can go." "I want to go." Bree nodded. Didn't push. Finished her bourbon in one long swallow, left cash on the table, and led Evelyn out of the bar with a hand on the small of her back that burned through the leather jacket. The night air hit like cold water. Evelyn breathed it in. September in D.C., warm but dropping, the smell of rain and pavement and the particular green scent of the trees along P Street. She walked to the car fast. Too fast. She could feel Bree behind her, matching her pace, not trying to catch up. They got in the car. Doors closed. The interior went silent, a sealed space, intimate after the noise of the bar. Bree started the engine, but didn't pull out. The car hummed around them, and the dashboard cast a pale blue glow over everything, and the silence was the kind that either resolves into conversation or detonates. Evelyn was shaking. Not visibly, not the dramatic trembling of someone falling apart. A fine vibration under her skin, in her fingertips, in the muscles of her thighs. She gripped her own knees and stared through the windshield at a stop sign. "Evelyn. I didn't like watching that." The words came out before she could stop them. Raw, artless, stripped of every layer of diplomatic training and image management, and 28 years of learning how to say nothing with perfect diction. "Watching what?" Bree's voice was calm. Neutral. Patient in a way that felt deliberate. "You. Dancing. With her?" Each word was a small act of violence against the person Evelyn had been raised to be. "Her hand on your hip. The way you laughed when I didn't like it." Silence. The car hummed. Outside, a couple walked past on the sidewalk, holding hands, unaware of anything happening in this black Audi with its two occupants and their mutual gravitational collapse. I didn't like it, Evelyn repeated, quieter now, the confession taking on the weight of a prayer. And I don't know what to do with that. Because I have no right to not like it. You're working with me. Where you can dance with whoever you want. I know that. I know this is insane. But I sat in that booth and I watched her touch you, and I wanted to. She stopped. Her breath was ragged. Her eyes were burning. You wanted to what? Bree asked. I wanted to be the one touching you. The car was very quiet. Evelyn stared at her hands on her knees and waited for the fallout, the professional redirection, the gentle letdown, the I'm flattered but this can't happen. She'd given Bree every reason to pull back. She'd just confessed to jealousy over a woman she had no claim to, in a parked car outside a lesbian bar, while wearing said woman's leather jacket and breathing the last traces of her perfume. It was the most transparent she'd ever been in her life, and the vulnerability of it was almost physically painful. Good, Bree said. One word. The same word she'd used in the booth. But the tone was different now, lower, warmer, stripped of the teasing edge. She said it the way a person says something they've been holding in their chest for days and can finally release. Evelyn looked at her. Bree was leaning against the driver's side door, one hand on the steering wheel, her face half lit by the dashboard glow. She wasn't smiling. She looked the way Evelyn felt. Undone. Careful. Standing at an edge and choosing not to step back. I asked Nina to dance because I wanted to see what you'd do, Bree said. That's a terrible thing to admit, and I'm admitting it anyway. You were testing me. I was watching you. There's a difference. Bree's thumb tapped the steering wheel once, twice, the only sign of agitation in an otherwise perfectly composed woman. I needed to know if what I've been feeling is one-sided. Because I can work with attraction. I've been attracted to clients before, and it doesn't go anywhere because it's professional and contained and manageable. But this, she gestured between them. This is not contained. No, Evelyn agreed. It's not. You were jealous. Violently. Of a woman I haven't slept with in 4 years. I don't care if it was 4 years or 4 minutes. She was touching you and I wanted it to be me. Bree exhaled. It was the first time Evelyn had seen her lose the rhythm of her composure. A small, shuddering release of breath that sounded like the end of an argument she'd been having with herself. I'm going to drive you home now. Bree? I'm going to drive you home, because if I don't drive you home, I'm going to kiss you in this car, and if I kiss you in this car, I'm not going to stop, and we are both too compromised right now for what happens after I don't stop. The words hit Evelyn in the stomach, in the chest, between her thighs. A full-body impact that left her breathless and aching and entirely certain that Bree was right and entirely furious about it. Okay, she whispered. Bree pulled out of the parking space. Drove. The car moved through DuPont Circle and across the bridge and down the long, amber-lit corridor of Arlington in silence. Not the comfortable silence of two people who didn't need to speak. The excruciating silence of two people who had too much to say and no safe way to say it. Evelyn sat in the passenger seat and felt the leather jacket around her shoulders and the ghost of Bree's fingertips on the back of her neck and the relentless, ungovernable heat between her thighs, and she thought, this is what it's supposed to feel like. This wanting. This ache. This is what I was supposed to be feeling all those years when I lay in bed with nice, appropriate men and felt nothing. She was not feeling nothing now. She was feeling everything all at once, in a body that had been numb for 28 years and had just been electrified. Bree pulled up in front of Evelyn's building. Put the car in park. Stared ahead. You should take the jacket off, she said. I'll need it back. Evelyn didn't move. Evelyn. What if I keep it? Bree closed her eyes. A muscle worked in her jaw. Then I'm going to spend all night thinking about you wearing my jacket in your apartment, and I've already spent too many nights thinking about you. The admission, raw, involuntary, more honest than anything Bree had said all evening, cracked something open in Evelyn's chest. Not the composure. Something deeper. Something that had been sealed since she was 14 and told to fold her hands and smile and stop wanting things that weren't in the plan. She shrugged the jacket off. The night air hit her bare shoulders. She folded the leather carefully and set it on the seat between them, and the gesture felt like leaving a piece of herself behind. "Good night, Bree." "Good night, Evelyn." She got out. Closed the door. Walked to the building entrance, swiped her keycard, stepped into the lobby. She did not look back, because if she looked back, she would see Bree watching her through the windshield, and if she saw that, she would turn around and get back in the car and they would both do something irreversible. She made it to her apartment. Locked the door. Leaned against it. Her hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking, not the fine vibration from before, but real, visible tremors, the kind that come from adrenaline and desire and the shattering recognition of what you've been missing and how long you've been missing it. She slid down the door and sat on the floor and pressed her hands against her face and thought about Bree's voice saying, "If I kiss you in this car, I'm not going to stop." She thought about it for a very long time. Then she got up, walked to her bedroom, stripped off the camisole and the jeans, and lay on the bed in her underwear, and this time she didn't hesitate. This time she didn't lie in the dark waiting for permission or building a case for why she shouldn't. She slid her hand down her stomach and between her thighs and she thought about Bree. Bree's mouth, Bree's hands, the sound of Bree's voice going low and certain when she said good. She thought about the booth, the shoulder-to-shoulder warmth, the fingertips on the back of her neck. She thought about being the one on that dance floor, pressed against Bree, moving with her, feeling those hips under her hands instead of watching someone else touch them. She came hard and gasping with her face turned into the pillow, and Bree's name caught between her teeth like a secret she couldn't say out loud yet. Afterwards she lay still, breathing, staring at the ceiling. She was not confused. She was not questioning. She was not running scenarios about what this meant, or what label applied, or whether it was a phase or a crisis or a detour. She was certain. For the first time in her life, about anything, she was absolutely certain. She wanted Sabrina Vale. Not abstractly. Not theoretically. Not as an experiment, or a rebellion, or a crisis to be managed. She wanted her in the specific, visceral, full-body way that she'd been told she was supposed to want someone and had never, not once, felt. She wanted to finish what the car had started. She wanted Bree's hands on her skin without the excuse of a zipper, or a collar, or a coaching session. She wanted to find out what happened after I'm not going to stop. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. One text. "You left smelling like my perfume. I noticed. Good night." Evelyn pressed the phone against her chest and closed her eyes, and did not sleep for a very long time. Chapter 6. Breaking point. 2 days. 2 days since the bar, the car, the confession. 2 days of radio silence except for logistics. Donor reception Saturday, Georgetown Fairmont, 7 p.m. Dress code cocktail attire. I'll send talking points by Friday. Professional. Contained. The kind of texts Bree sent to every client, stripped of anything that could be screenshot and weaponized. 2 days of not texting what she actually wanted to say, which was, "I haven't stopped thinking about your voice, saying you wanted to be the one touching me, and I need you to understand that I am holding on to my professional ethics by my fingernails." She didn't text that. She sent talking points. She coordinated with Doug. She reviewed the guest list for the reception and flagged 3 journalists who might ask about the bar photo and rehearsed neutral redirects in her head until they sounded natural. She did her job. And then Saturday came, and Evelyn walked into the Fairmont ballroom in the green dress, and Bree's job ceased to exist. She saw her from across the room. Bree was by the bar, nursing a club soda she didn't want, talking to a lobbyist she didn't care about, performing the particular brand of strategic socializing that her work required, and then the lobby doors opened and Evelyn appeared, and every other person in the room became furniture. The green dress, The one from the boutique, the one Bree had chosen, the one with the zipper she'd worked free while her knuckles grazed Evelyn's spine. Evelyn had taken Bree's advice: hair down, loose waves over bare shoulders, the gold hoop earrings instead of the pearls. She looked nothing like the woman in conference room B. She looked nothing like a senator's daughter playing a part. She looked like herself. For the first time, fully, unmistakably herself. And she was devastating. The dress moved when she walked, structured enough to hold its shape, fluid enough to suggest everything underneath. The green caught the ballroom light and turned her skin luminous, and her collarbones were visible above the neckline, and Bree thought about the fitting room. Your collarbones are good, you shouldn't hide them, and felt the memory like a hand on her sternum. The lobbyist was saying something about infrastructure spending. Bree said, absolutely, which could have been a response to anything, and excused herself. She didn't approach Evelyn. That wasn't the play. Tonight Bree was a consultant, present but peripheral, watching the client perform, available for course corrections but otherwise invisible. She positioned herself at the edge of the room with a sightline to the main floor and watched Evelyn work. And God, she worked. Whatever had shifted in Evelyn over the last 2 weeks, the coaching, the bar, the confessions, the slow dismantling of her performance armor, it had unlocked something. She moved through the room like a woman who'd remembered she had a body. She shook hands with donors and held their gaze a beat longer than before, not in the mechanical way of someone counting seconds, but in the genuine way of someone who was actually present. She laughed, her real laugh, the one Bree had heard once, bright and startled, and a cluster of donors leaned in like sunflowers tracking light. Bree watched from the periphery and felt two things simultaneously. The first was pride. Professional satisfaction, the consultant's high. The product was performing, the strategy was working, the client was transformed. This was what she was paid for. This was what she was good at. The second was something she had no professional language for. It lived in her chest and her throat and the base of her spine, and it tightened every time Evelyn smiled, every time a donor touched her arm, every time Evelyn's gaze swept the room and found Bree and held for 1 second longer than it should have before moving on. She was watching a woman come alive, and she was in love with her, and the two facts were tangled together in a way that made it impossible to separate the professional from the personal, the pride from the desire, the job from the catastrophe. Kira's voice in her head, do not fuck the client. Too late for that warning. Not because she'd fucked her, she hadn't, but because the line between wanting to and doing it had become so thin it was theoretical. She wanted Evelyn Hart with a specificity that terrified her. Not in the abstract, not in the way you want someone beautiful who happens to be nearby. She wanted the way Evelyn's voice went raw when she stopped performing. She wanted the flash of dry humor that surfaced when Evelyn was tired enough to stop filtering. She wanted the tremble she'd felt in the fitting room, the confession in the apartment, the aching honesty of "I wanted to be the one touching you." She wanted to be the reason Evelyn stopped being afraid. That was the dangerous part. Not the attraction, she could manage attraction. The dangerous part was caring. The dangerous part was watching Evelyn Hart transform and knowing she had no right to want to be part of what she became. 2 hours in. The reception was winding down, the donor class drifting toward taxis and town cars, the campaign staff beginning the slow process of consolidation. Doug caught Bree's eye from across the room and gave her a thumbs up, which was his highest form of praise. She nodded back. Scanned the room for Evelyn. Gone. Bree's chest tightened. She set down her club soda and moved, not rushing, never rushing, because rushing was conspicuous, through the ballroom toward the lobby. The coat check. The restrooms. The corridor that led to the hotel's lower-level conference rooms, dimly lit and carpeted in the hushed, tasteful way of places designed for private conversations. She found Evelyn halfway down the corridor, leaning against the wall with her eyes closed and her hands pressed flat against the wallpaper like she was trying to hold the building up. The green dress pulled slightly where she'd kicked off one heel, and her hair had fallen forward over her face, and she was breathing in the deliberate, controlled way of someone managing a panic response. "Hey," Bree said. Soft. The kind of voice you'd use with a spooked horse or a woman who'd just performed for 200 people and hit her limit. Evelyn's eyes opened. The composure was there, barely. Like a sheet of ice with water running fast underneath it, one more degree from cracking. I'm fine. You're standing in a hallway with one shoe off. I needed a minute. You can have as many minutes as you want. Do you need water? Air? I can get Doug too. Don't get Doug. Evelyn's voice sharpened. She straightened off the wall, pushed her hair back, slipped her foot back into the abandoned heel. The transformation was instantaneous, crumbling woman to composed professional in under 3 seconds. It was the most impressive and the saddest thing Bree had ever witnessed. I don't need managing. I just needed to not smile for 60 seconds. You were incredible tonight. I was performing. That's different. You were doing both. The policy stuff, when you talked to Henderson about the education funding, that was real. He was eating out of your hand. Because you taught me how to package it. How to make the real thing sound palatable. Evelyn's eyes found hers, and the ice over rushing water quality was more visible now. That's what you do, right? You take the messy, inconvenient truth and you smooth it into something digestible. Something safe. There was a charge underneath the words. A current of something that wasn't gratitude. Is that what you think I'm doing? Bree asked. Isn't it? Evelyn took a step toward her. One step. The corridor was narrow enough that it halved the distance between them. You walk into my life and you tell me to take my hair down and try on a new dress and go to a bar and feel things, and then you put me back in a ballroom and watch me smile for donors, and I'm supposed to, what? Be grateful? Be fixed? Evelyn. Is this what you wanted? Another step. Closer now. Close enough that Bree could see the slight tremble in Evelyn's jaw, the muscle working under the skin. The perfect little campaign daughter? Polished and presentable and performing on command? Am I fixed now, Bree? You were never broken. Then stop treating me like a project. The words ricocheted off the corridor walls. Evelyn's composure shattered, not slowly, not in the controlled way Bree had seen before, but all at once like a window hit by a rock. Her eyes were bright, furious, and underneath the fury was something desperate that Bree recognized with the accuracy of a woman who'd spent her career reading the things people tried to hide. It wasn't anger. It was want. The kind of want that masquerades as anger because anger is easier. Anger is familiar. Anger doesn't require you to stand in a hotel corridor and admit that you are coming apart because the woman you want is 3 feet away and won't close the distance. I am not treating you like a project, Bree said. Her voice was steady. Her hands were not, she pressed them against her thighs to keep them still. I am standing in this hallway trying very hard to be professional because if I stop being professional for even 1 second, then stop. Evelyn. Stop being professional. Evelyn was directly in front of her now. 1 foot away. The green dress catching the dim corridor light. Her eyes wide open, no mask, no performance, just the raw, terrified, incandescent face of a woman who'd reached the end of what she could endure alone. I just spent 2 hours smiling at people I don't care about, talking about things that don't matter, pretending I'm the woman my family wants me to be. And the entire time, the only thing I could think about was you. Across the room. Watching me. Do you know what that's like? Do you know what it's like to perform for a room full of people while the only audience you care about is a woman you can't touch? Bree's throat was tight. Her heart was hammering. She could feel her own pulse in her fingertips, in her neck, in the place behind her sternum where discipline lived. I know exactly what that's like, she said. I've been watching you all night. Then you know what I'm about to say. Don't? I stood in that ballroom and I smiled and I charmed and I performed, and the entire time I was pretending I don't want to do every single thing I saw those women doing in that bar. Evelyn's voice dropped. Rough, shaking, certain. With you. The corridor went silent. The muffled noise of the reception was a distant planet. The carpet was thick, the lighting was low, and the air between them had turned to something combustible. Bree had a choice. She'd been making this choice in increments for 2 weeks, in the conference room, in the boutique, in the fitting room, in the apartment doorway, in the car. Every time, she'd chosen the boundary. Every time she'd stepped back, maintained the line, protected them both from the thing that was building between them like pressure in a sealed vessel. She was tired of choosing the boundary. She kissed Evelyn Hart in a corridor of the Georgetown Fairmont at 9:47 p.m. on a Saturday, and the world caught fire. Or Evelyn kissed her. Or they met in the middle. It didn't matter, because the origin was irrelevant once it started. What mattered was the wall against Evelyn's back and Bree's hands on her waist and the sound Evelyn made, a sound Bree would replay in her mind for the rest of her life, half gasp, half sob, the sound of a woman who'd been holding her breath for 28 years and finally let it out. Evelyn's mouth was warm. Soft. She tasted like champagne and the expensive lipstick she wore and something underneath both that was just her, clean, sweet, a little desperate. She kissed like a woman who'd never been kissed properly, which she probably hadn't, and was discovering in real time what it was supposed to feel like. Bree felt it in her entire body. Not just her mouth, everywhere. In her hands, which slid from Evelyn's waist to her hips, and pulled her closer. In her chest, where her heart was beating so hard she could feel it in her teeth. In her stomach, which dropped and tightened and flooded with heat. In the base of her spine, where arousal coiled and spread like ink in water. She pressed Evelyn against the wall and kissed her deeper. Evelyn's hands were in her hair, both hands, fingers tangling in the twists, pulling her closer with a greediness that was brand new and completely uncontrolled. Evelyn kissed the way she'd talked about policy, with sudden, passionate intensity once the filter was gone, all that compressed energy released in a single direction. Bree? Evelyn breathed against her mouth, and the sound of her own name in that voice, wrecked and wanting, almost undid her. I know, Bree murmured. She kissed the corner of Evelyn's mouth. Her jaw. The spot just below her ear where her pulse was hammering, visible, frantic. She put her mouth there and felt the rhythm against her lips, and Evelyn's head fell back against the wall, and her hands tightened in Bree's hair and she made that sound again, the gasp sob, the release, and Bree thought, I'm going to ruin both our lives and I don't care. Evelyn pulled her back up. Kissed her mouth again. Harder this time, less careful, teeth catching Bree's lower lip in a way that was instinct rather than technique, and sent a bolt of heat straight through Bree's body. She responded, pressed her thigh between Evelyn's, felt the green dress ride up, felt Evelyn's hips shift forward against her in a movement that was involuntary and devastating. Bree's hand slid up Evelyn's side. Over the structured bodice of the dress, along the curve of her ribs, to the bare skin of her collarbone. She traced the line of it with her thumb. The collarbone Evelyn's mother said was vulgar, and Evelyn shuddered against her. You're shaking, Bree said against her mouth. Don't stop. We're in a hallway. I don't care. Your father's donors are 50 feet away. I don't care. And the way she said it, fierce, raw, the voice of a woman burning her own rulebook in real time, made Bree want to do absolutely criminal things to her against this wallpaper. She kissed her again, deep and slow and intentional, and felt Evelyn melt into it, felt the tension in her body transform from rigidity to responsiveness, from armor to surrender. Footsteps. Bree heard them first, the muffled thud of dress shoes on thick carpet, coming from the lobby end of the corridor. She pulled back. Evelyn's eyes flew open, days dilated, lips swollen and lipstick smeared. Someone's coming, Bree whispered. They separated. 2 feet of corridor air between them. Bree smoothed her blouse, wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Evelyn straightened the green dress, pushed her hair back, assembled her composure with the speed and precision of a woman who'd been trained for exactly this, the emergency reconstruction of an acceptable surface. A man rounded the corner. Hotel staff, gray suit, name tag carrying a clipboard. He glanced at them without interest. Ladies, the Whitaker reception is wrapping up. Can I help you find the exit? Just getting some air, Bree said. Her voice was steady. She was impressed with herself for that. Thank you. He moved on. His footsteps receded. They stood in the corridor, 2 feet apart, breathing like they'd sprinted. Evelyn's hand was trembling at her side. Her lips were still swollen. The lipstick was still smeared, a faint rose stain at the corner of her mouth that looked exactly like what it was, evidence. Bree reached out. Slowly. Wiped the smear away with her thumb, her fingertip tracing the edge of Evelyn's lower lip. Evelyn's eyes closed at the touch, briefly, and she turned her face into Bree's hand for 1 second. 1 second of complete, unguarded tenderness that hit Bree harder than the kiss had. I should go back in, Evelyn whispered. You should. I don't want to. I know. When can I see you? Evelyn. When can I see you? Not for work. Not for coaching. When can I be in a room with you, where I don't have to pretend I don't want you? Bree's thumb was still on her lip. She pulled it away. Put her hands in her pockets, because they couldn't be trusted anywhere else. We need to talk about this, she said. What it means. What the risks are. What happens if. I don't want to talk about risks. I've spent my entire life talking about risks. Evelyn stopped. Swallowed. I want to be in your apartment with the door closed, and no one watching, and your hands on me without a zipper as an excuse. The image, Evelyn in her apartment, the door closed, the warm light, hands on skin without pretense, detonated in Bree's mind with the force of a flashbang. She felt it everywhere. Go back to the reception, Bree said. Her voice was rough. Fix your lipstick. Smile at Doug. Say goodnight to your father. And then go home. And text me when you're there. What happens when I text you? We figure out what comes next. Together. Evelyn looked at her for a long moment. The composure was back, mostly. Underneath it, like coals under ash, was the heat. The knowledge. The irreversible fact that they had kissed in a hotel corridor, with 200 donors on the other side of a wall, and neither of them had wanted to stop. Okay, Evelyn said. She straightened. Smoothed the dress. Touched her hair. Became, in the span of 5 seconds, the senator's daughter again, poised, polished, unreadable. She walked past Bree toward the ballroom, heels precise on the carpet. At the end of the corridor, she stopped. Half turned. The light from the lobby caught the side of her face. Bree? Yeah? That was my first kiss. With a woman. A pause. I want you to know it was worth waiting 28 years for. She disappeared around the corner. Bree stood in the empty corridor and did not move for a very long time. Then she walked to the restroom. Locked the door. Stood at the sink and pressed her palms flat against the marble and looked at herself in the mirror. She was wrecked. Not visibly, her clothes were straight, her hair was intact, her expression was controlled. But her eyes were dark and wide and her lips were swollen, and there was a rose-colored smear on the collar of her blouse where Evelyn's lipstick had transferred, and she could still taste champagne and expensive lipstick, and the sweet, devastating mouth of a woman who had just kissed her like it was the first real thing she'd ever done. She ran the water. Splashed her face. Pressed a wet paper towel against the back of her neck. She looked at the lipstick stain on her collar. She should blot it out. She should remove the evidence, the same way she removed evidence for every client in every crisis she'd ever managed. She didn't touch it. She looked at herself in the mirror, flushed, undone, a woman standing in a hotel bathroom at the precise intersection of professional disaster and personal revelation, and said out loud to the empty room, "You are completely, professionally, personally fucked." The mirror did not disagree. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. "Evelyn, I'm home. I can still taste you." Bree closed her eyes. Pressed the phone against her forehead. Breathed. Then she typed, with fingers that were not quite steady. "I can still taste you too. We need to talk." "I don't want to talk." "I know. We need to, anyway." A pause. Then, your apartment. Tomorrow. Tell me what time and I'll be there. Bree stared at the message. Tomorrow. Evelyn in her apartment. The door closed. No donors, no corridor, no near discovery. Just two women and the enormous, terrifying, inevitable thing between them. She typed 7 p.m. Evelyn, I'll be there. Bree pocketed the phone. Looked at herself one more time. Touched the lipstick stain on her collar with 2 fingers, gently, the way you'd touch a bruise you wanted to remember. Then she straightened her spine, fixed her expression, and walked out of the bathroom and back into the world where she was a professional and this was manageable and everything was under control. She was lying to everyone, including herself. But the lipstick stain stayed.
Drew is asleep. His arm is locked around Wes, his breath warm in Wes's hair, his hand held against Wes's chest like something he found and isn't letting go of. And Wes is wide awake, doing the math, the merciless 9-year math of loving a man who just said his full name like a prayer and called what they have just us. And for the first time, the very first time, the math is different. Because the question Wes is asking in the dark isn't, when does he leave? It's, what if it isn't a lie? You want the answer? Straight Bait Roommate by Jace Wilder. Available now in ebook and Kindle Unlimited. Links are in the description. And if you want the bonus chapter, Sunday Morning, A Kitchen Counter, and A Peach That Died a Hero. That's on the website, also linked below. Too explicit for retail. You're welcome. This has been Fractal Enigma Audio Previews. See you next time.